to this, the 9th in the series of lunchtime learning sessions on risk management in bite-size bits. Today we're going to talk about the risk management policy, and this is fundamental to any implementation of risk management in any organization. So let's have a look. First of all, a quick word about ourselves. Now, I know many of you are returning viewers and will know, so I'll be quick on this one. We see ourselves as experienced risk and compliance professionals like yourselves, and we're members of various organisations like the Institute of Risk Management, Institute of Bankers, Compliance Ireland, and so on, in an effort to stay up to date with what you're doing and the challenges in meeting risk management and compliance in your organizations. Yes, we supply a system called calQrisk. We've changed our trading name to calQrisk after that's what people called us. And we recently won an award for the best product of the year, and we've been often nominated, so we can now safely say it's an award-winning product. Our customers are generally in the financial services sector or the not-for-profit sectors. So whether you're in charities, sports, or housing associations, or fund management, investment management, credit unions, lots of different organizations in the financial services space. That's us. Okay. Third slide, always a quote. And I like Mahatma Gandhi's quotes. This is appropriate. A policy is a temporary creative liable to be changed, but while it holds good, it has got to be pursued with apostolic zeal. I think that's what that's saying to us is, your policy is your starting point. It's saying, we will do this, and this is what we expect. And then live the policy. There's no point in doing a policy and then be seen to do something different. You've got to live your policy. So the starting point, well, I have 7 sections in policies that I do, and these are the headings I'm going to cover in it. This one slide I'm going to build is the essence of today's lunchtime learning. The first section in the policy that I always write is scope and rationale. You know, what's the scope of the risk management, and to whom does the policy apply? If it's the whole organization, say it. If you're starting small and you're going to start with a division, you say it. But the rationale, why are you doing this? You've got to sell this, remember, to all your employees, all staff, your colleagues. Why are we doing this? Is this extra work? Well, I would hope that it's saving people work, ultimately. Yes, it might be initial extra work in the first month or two, but say why you're doing it. You know, if the reason is to have increased confidence in achieving your goals, that's a very realistic and good reason for implementing risk management. So say why. The objectives, I like to see objectives as what outcomes do you expect from this policy? What do you expect to see changing? And I would say, you know, that ultimately the objectives of risk management are to reduce losses, to increase the likelihood of achieving objectives, to I'm just looking at some examples here. The objective of risk management is maybe to embed in the culture of the organization the management of risk. So it's not just a small group of people who are managing the risk for the organization. No, we are all risk managers. And the idea of the policy should be to set as an objective that we are all managing risk within our area of responsibility, and therefore reducing losses, increasing the likelihood of achieving objectives. Look, I can't tell you what the objectives are for your organization, but have clear objectives so you know if it's working. Because at the end of a year, at the end of 2 years, you've got to look and see, well, are we achieving the outcomes that we thought we would achieve when we started this journey to formally manage risk in the organization? The policy statement section of it is they're the big statements. The organization saying that they're committed to managing risk. And maybe you add in that we will follow the guidelines of the 31,000 standard. You might state and should state in that risk management is the responsibility of every employee. These are strong statements, making it clear what you expect from people, what you expect to happen, that it's a priority and that it will be implemented throughout the organization, that you will provide the resources necessary, that you will provide the training necessary. These are your statements to your, I'm speaking to you as representative of the organization, you're saying to all the people in the organization, this is what we will do, this is what we expect, and this is our commitment, and this is, what we'll do in the training. So these are the hard statements that you now have to follow through on. Risk appetite and risk criteria. Now, do you put this in the policy? Do you have them as separate documents? I think if it's in the policy, put it in as an appendix, because you might have to change it separately. So I think an appendix is useful or separate. And if it's separate, certainly reference it. But you do need to state your risk appetite. How much risk will you take? Now, this was the subject of another Lunchtime Learning and would be within most organizations the subject of many discussions, because depending on the size of your organization, you've got to disaggregate that risk appetite into the various departments and sub-departments and areas of responsibility, so people know how much risk they can take. How much, if you're lending money, what's the biggest loan you can lend? What's the longest term you can offer? These are all elements of risk appetite. If you're investing money, how much will you put with one single investor or one single fund? Setting limits, this is all part of risk appetite, as well as other things, saying things like what you will tolerate and will not tolerate. So I think it is part of the policy. You can either put a summary in the policy and refer to the detailed document, or include the detailed document as part of the policy. Totally up to you. There's no hard and fast rule. The same with criteria, and these are linked, because criteria is how you're going to measure risk. And certainly there's a good argument for including this in the policy. Again, I put it in as an appendix, because you may want to update that more regularly than the core of the policy. I like to keep policy text short, maybe 3 or 4 pages max, and put maybe detail in an appendix. We've covered risk criteria in another session, and you will all know, if you're using whether it's a 4x4 or 5x5 matrix, what does a 1 mean, a 2 mean, 3 mean, and how are you going to articulate that such that you get consistent measurement of risk, likelihood and consequence. So it certainly, I think, belongs in the policy as a clarification of how you're going to measure it. That's how you're going to measure the individual risk. Then how are you going to measure your performance? How are you going to report back to the management of the company and to the board of the company how you're doing? How well is risk being managed? What are our top risks? What will be measured and what will be reported? Now, most organizations will report maybe in the typical risk register. It's the profile of the organization. And if it's going to the board, it's probably just a 10 or 15 risks. And these probably will be risks at a high level. You certainly won't be reporting 20 AML risks to the board, but you might report 1 AML risk with a lot of detail. You might manage 10 AML risks, anti-money laundering, but what else will you report? Will you report incidents, near misses, loss events, risk events, whatever you want to call them? Because I think they are an indicator of how well you're managing risk. If the whole idea is to reduce losses and increase likelihood of achieving objectives, certainly I think risk events is something I would like to see reported. But again, it's up to you how you report, what you report. I think I would report actions completed to address risk, to address maybe if you have a project on data protection and you know that to comply completely with GDPR requires specific actions, then you might, for a couple of months, be reporting on actions you've taken to minimize any data protection risks you might have. If you have information security concerns and you have, again, started a program to address and improve your position and your defenses regarding cybersecurity, certainly I would be reporting that back. If you have top 10 risks and some of them are outside of your appetite, then you should be certainly reporting on actions you're doing to reduce this. And that's another thing you might report on. If there have been breaches, temporary breaches, major breaches, but departures, shall we say, from the risk appetite, whether it was for a day or for a week or just one incident, I think they should be reported as well. Now, the policy is where you will state what will be measured, what will be reported, and who will do the reporting. The roles and responsibilities. I mean, who's going to be the champion for this? Who's going to drive this through the organization? Not do all the work, but who's going to be the risk officer who will encourage, cajole, train, support, and report, and do all of the driving of this? Who'll do the training? Who are you going to train? And what are people's responsibilities? I think you've got to, clarify that in a policy. Again, it's back to the commitment statements that you're going to do this. Now, in the roles and responsibilities, you're spelling out who is going to do what, and who's going to be responsible for what in what area. And finally, the education and training. And I always put this in policies as well, because often if you're introducing a new discipline in an organization, you have a deficiency maybe in knowledge and skills. And yes, you could wait a year for people to organically acquire those skills, but I have always been a believer in spending money on training and training people so that they can do the job better. So I think it should be in the policy as well. Commitment to training, who's going to do the training, and the education, and how that's going to happen. So that's kind of the essence of it. Just two other slides I would like to cover, and that is approving and reviewing the policy. This has to be done by senior management initially, because ultimately they're going to be implementing it, and by the board, and so that the board are happy that this is the right direction for the organization. If I was a member of the senior management or the board, I'd be saying, is this aligned with the organization's overall objectives? And I would like to see evidence of that. Does it reinforce the need to integrate risk management into the overall culture of the organization? And I think this is important. Again, the policy needs to reinforce that. If you don't get it into the culture of the organization, it's only words. You want people to be constantly assessing risk in their mind. It doesn't take hours. You assess a risk when you cross the road. You look, is there cars coming? That's assessing a risk. That's a cultural thing. And I would say, does the policy require integration in core activities and decision-making? Because if it ultimately doesn't lead to better decision-making, a decision-making that is informed by the risks, then you're not really getting the full benefit from risk management. And of course, the number one question is this achievable? If you're setting out a policy and you're not resourcing it and you're not providing the training, and it's just going to be another one of these that doesn't happen. So if I'm certainly reviewing it and approving it, I'd like all of these to be that I can say yes to them. And ensuring the stakeholders understand the policy. Well, who are the stakeholders? The board and senior management and the employees, probably the main group are the employees, but third parties as well. Increasingly, we rely on third parties. Don't forget them. They're like an extension of your organization. Now, how do you ensure that they understand the policy? Well, I would expand on the initial bit, the scope and rationale. I would be explaining to them the context in which we're doing this risk management and why we're doing it and what we expect. I would tell people their roles. Now, in the past, there's two ways I've done communication of policies. I've sometimes attached them to an email and sent them out to people and said, if you have any questions, come and talk to me. But I've also put people's names on the front page and got them to pass it around and sign that they've read and understood. And that is better. But for some policies, I think you have to sit down in groups of people and go through it and explain it to them and give them a chance to ask questions, make sure they understand it. If people don't understand the policy, or if you haven't communicated it, why did you bother writing it? Okay, that's it, folks. That's took me a bit longer than I thought. I thought I would be, I have too much time. But if you have questions, I'm just going to check now. Put them into the Q&A. If you have any questions, certainly put them into the Q&A, but I would hope that it's all fairly self-explanatory. I'll give it a couple of minutes. And before anybody asks, yes, how often would you review a policy? Yeah, I know some organizations have loads of policies and they'll be reviewing them every month. Typically, people say review it once a year, but if the risk officer is reviewing it and they feel that it doesn't need to go to the board to get signed off again, it may not. It may be good for 3 years. But if something changes in the market, if there's a change in regulation or change in your circumstances, it might prompt to review the policy. Okay, we have a couple of questions. Will copies of the slides be distributed? Yes, slides and access to a recording. I'm recording this will be available. That's on our YouTube channel. If you haven't signed up, sign up to our YouTube channel. All of the previous lunchtime learning sessions are up there and some of our webinars as well. Can you confirm how calQrisk can help streamline and embed risk management within an organization? I'd love to, Philip. Please email me separately, or I'll see if I can dig out your email address. We have a software tool. It's cloud-based, can be in-house as well, and helps you gather the information. And I think the magic is in the reporting. And increasingly, we've been doing more and more bespoke reports for customers. But it's, I think, capturing the information first and having it in one single source. When talking about risk appetites, is it sufficient to have them stated for your key risks, top 5? Triana, no, I would say it's not sufficient. I think risk appetite has to cover the areas of activity and to tell, I'm going to say management or anybody who's making decisions on behalf of the organization, how far they can go. Whether it's money they can spend, whether it's what they can invest, where they can invest. Lending, you take any organization, you need to set boundaries as an organization as to what you will allow. And it starts maybe at the board setting, maybe large appetite statements, detailed ones, or at a higher level, but would have to be disaggregated to the various departments so people know exactly how much risk they can take. And I think it's not for the risk. Yes, you can apply to individual risks, but I think it's for individuals in the organization who know the limits. In your opinion, what is the difference between a policy and a procedure? Well, a policy is a statement of commitments, first of all, what we will do, what we will expect. So it's more the what. Whereas I think procedures is the how. So if you say we will implement a risk management process in the organization, that's a policy statement. The procedure is then details on how you implement that process, who's responsible and what the details. So it's in the hierarchy of things, policies at the top, it might lead to multiple procedures, and procedures might lead to individual work instructions. But yeah, and I tend to not put procedures into policies. I've seen people put in the how into the policy as well. You're just making it more difficult for a board to sign off on a policy if you're going to put in the how you're going to implement the policy. I would keep them separate. Policy is the what, and the procedure is the how. The boards don't need to know exactly how it's being done. It's a detail. They're not in the organization every day. So I certainly keep the how out of policies, but I've seen that water muddied between policy and procedure. Okay. I think I've got them. I'm just looking to see if I have any others. Yeah. Okay, folks, we've gone over the time, and thank you for the questions. Always good to get some questions. Do keep an eye out for our next event, which is next month in about 4 weeks, and it's on integrating the governance, risk and compliance, and that's with my colleague Paul O'Brien. Paul himself is black belt in process and lean management, so he'll bring that knowledge to bear on that, I'm sure. Okay, thank you for listening, and have a good day. Bye-bye.